Hi everyone, and welcome to the B-Link Leading Innovation in Food Waste event. This is the next part of our VIBE series. So we are B-Link Innovation, a business unit, a part of Lincoln University. We specialise in the facilitation of innovative ideas in not only the Canterbury region, but nationwide around New Zealand. Our workspace is located in the heart of Lincoln University's campus, where our events would normally be held, but because of the current situation, we're currently doing them online. In this workshop space that we're normally in, we hold events primarily focused around innovative solutions and inspiring people from farm gate industry to academia. Not only do we hold our own events, but we also have a workshop space and boardroom available to hire for your own events. One of our main points of difference is a far-reaching audience and a collaborative nature to ensure that New Zealand has best possible outcomes in terms of environmental sustainability and native efficiencies. So just before we get on to our event, just a little bit on housekeeping. So this webinar today will be recorded and sent out to you after the event, as long as you've signed up via Eventbrite. This means that you can spend time listening rather than feverishly taking notes. There'll also be a Q&A session following our main speaker. So please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen so we can pose those questions to Miranda. There's a thumbs up button next to each question, and the more the question is upvoted, the more the question will be prioritised. So if you like a question, give it a thumbs up. And as a default, all participants are muted and all webcams are switched off, so don't worry too much about that. So before we get started, if you see or hear anything you would like to share on social media, please don't forget to mention us. Here's our handles. We want to make sure our events and the ideas that come out of them are as far-reaching as possible. So please make sure you share with your friends. So without further ado, please help me make our speaker, Miranda Burdon, feel very welcome. Miranda is a born and bred Cantabrian, now residing in Auckland, with her husband Andrew and 3 sons. Her over 20 years of executive experience has been centred on FMCG in New Zealand and global businesses, along with a constant involvement supporting the not-for-profit sector. Recent executive positions were as CEO of Global Women and Global Marketing Manager for Pernod Ricard. Miranda is a shareholder and chair of Meadow Mushrooms and Gigs Dairy Farm. She is also the chair of Live Ocean, an entity established by Peter Burling and Virtue to support the charge for ocean health. She's also recently found Food Nation, a business whose mission it is to get more plants on more plates for more people and our planet. Miranda is a Te Hono alumni and recognised leader in the primary sector. Miranda, over to you.
Thanks very much, Julia. And hi, everyone. Oh, I just screen shared, but no, I haven't. Hold on, I'm just going to try and pop up my screen if that's okay, so that we've got the right. Oh, this is technology at its best. Just bear with me for a second. There we go. Got it. Okay. Sorry for the novice behaviour. As I said, thanks very much for the introduction, Julia, and to the team at B-Link, and for anyone who is sitting behind the screen today. So what we're talking about today is waste minimisation and waste management, and particularly food waste. And it's increasingly a big topic globally as much as domestically. But my disclaimer is I wouldn't put myself out there as an expert on this. I think I'm more of a case study on this. So I thought it would be useful, though, just to kick off with a bit of context. I'm not sure how much everyone else is aware of the issues that relate to food waste and waste minimisation, but they're increasingly in the media and seen as a real opportunity globally as much as domestically. So I'll start with a little bit of context on the topic, and then really spend most of the time talking about Meadow and the work that we've done there to both understand the opportunities and develop programs to address these. Before I go anywhere though, probably the starting point for any conversation like this is to establish the scale of the problem. What is now widely recognised and has been calculated is that 1/3 of all food production is wasted. So you put that in context, everything related to the production of 1 in 3 apples is wasted. And it's really hard actually to comprehend the scale of food waste until you start to look at some of the specific numbers. So 1.3, this is a global figure obviously, 1.3 billion tonnes of food production is wasted every year. And that's, when you think about that, that's happening at the same time as there's over 800 million people who don't have enough to eat. And when we talk about waste, we're not just talking about waste of the end product, we're talking about waste the whole way through the cycle. Now, we're heading into a time in 2050 where we're expecting the population of planet Earth to be 10 billion people. For us to feed 10 billion people, we need 60% more calories than we're producing today, which quite simply won't be possible. But the crazy part about that is actually that we're already producing enough to feed 10 billion people, but not unless we make a really fundamental systemic shift in how we operate and how we produce. So that's the opportunity that sits around waste management. There's a few kind of fundamental pieces in the puzzle. Diet is one of the most effective ways that we can change the outcomes, and how we handle our food and treat the food that we take home. And the second part is resource management. So if you think of the capitals and the materials that we use to produce a kilo of any kind of food really, you're using your human capital in the form of labor, your natural capitals like your land, your seed, your fertilizer, water, all of the pieces, natural resources, and obviously financial capital is all going into the production of food. So the idea that a third of that is then wasted is beyond comprehension. And then there's the conversation around emissions. So associated with food waste and general waste management is the impact that it's having. So the mammoth, absolutely enormous figure associated with the food production waste is 8% of global emissions. And Project Drawdown called out the other day after a study that they did that the most effective way we could address climate change is by addressing food production waste. It's a pretty big, hairy, audacious goal. And very much, as you can see, on the global agenda. So I'm sure you all know about the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. These were signed in 2015. There are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and the one that I'm highlighting here is goal number 12. This is all around responsible consumption and production. And underpinning this goal was a recognition that globally the way we're producing food and handling it just isn't sustainable. And within each of the goals are sub-targets. Target 12.3 is targeting a 50% reduction in food waste by 2030. Now this was established in 2015, but we're now only 10 years away from that target. And all the countries, all 193 who signed up to the goals, had actually made a commitment and signed up to these targets. But unfortunately, not everyone has put plans in place to actually make sure that we hit the targets. So in New Zealand, for example, the waste attributed to food production isn't known. And at this point, New Zealand has no actual target in place for measuring waste or a formula for measuring waste. So this is work in progress, and the wonderful Miranda Burdon from the University of Otago has been involved in a recent report, the Miranda report, and the Environmental Select Committee met in March on this, having addressed the initial recommendations to look at how they were going to take that work forward. That report has a lot of recommendations, but at the very start of it is the need for us to both understand what the waste issue is, set targets, and then put in place a plan to address them. So this is work in action. But when you look at the numbers in New Zealand, it's still terrifying. So these are just specific to New Zealand. This is New Zealand's waste economics. And when I say we don't really know, you can see the sort of estimated ranges that are in the market at the moment. So at the moment, the estimates, and this is from 2011 data, of our total food production waste goes from 327,000 tonnes to 1.3 million tonnes of wastage through the product life cycle. Much more specific data was done more recently through bin audits, and that's what's captured in the right-hand part of the slide. And that valued the cost of this waste at almost $1 billion, $872 million, which hits everyone's pockets at $563 per household. This is just household waste. So this is just the stuff that people have brought home and then thrown away, unused, or for whatever reason, and has been audited within the context of the bin audit. It's an enormous amount of waste and completely unsustainable. There are some pretty cool things that are going on in New Zealand though, so I just thought it'd be good to call a few of these out. And you could talk for hours on this. So the people to talk to are lovefoodhatewaste.co.nz. They've got really great resources that you can use. Tessa Vincent has very recently set up 12.3champions.org, which is a group of people, really effectively the thought leaders in this space. People are doing some amazing things to address food waste. And she is piggybacking on a global organization of the same name, so they've got a lot of momentum. In the States, a company called Appeal Sciences has come up with some very clever technology where you put what is effectively another skin around products, food products, horticulture particularly, and that extends the life of the product. That in its own right will reduce waste to quite a significant extent. Now for companies like Apple sector, that's a really exciting opportunity that I know they're looking into. And a little wee gig in this topic is Fridge Cleaner, which, disclosure, is a friend of ours, who's done a really great initiative, and she's developed a recipe book that she's putting out on Instagram with a whole lot of ideas about what you can use with those last dregs of carrots or broccoli or what you have at the end of the week in the fridge. That is actually the kind of thing individuals can do very easily to massively reduce the amount of waste that as a country we're collecting. But rather than keeping it at a very macro level, I thought I'd focus more on Meadow. So let's start with who we are. So I don't know how much you know about us, but we're a private company. We've been going for 50 years now. We're now the largest producer of mushrooms in New Zealand, and have been pretty single-minded in our focus on mushrooms for all of that time. I think the point really about the fact that we're a private company means that we make long-term decisions, so we don't tend to focus on the shorter-term payback, and we invest to be sustainable for the future. So we're very aware of the impact we have on the people and the companies around us, and that's how we make our decisions. This is Meadows. On the left-hand side, and there's a tricky little pointer here that I'm going to use. On this side is the Composting Site, which is out in South Canterbury. And I just wanted to highlight a few things here. This is our goody water storage facility. We have an ammonia scrubber here. And over here we capture all our rainwater. These are bunkers where we actually make the compost and it goes through the process. And then on this side we have our growing farm. Now, as you know, mushrooms grow in the dark. As I'm sure you know, mushrooms grow in the dark. They grow 365 days of the year, and we harvest them 364 days of the year. They are very sensitive little souls, and so they're very sensitive to the environmental factors, and I think this has probably kept us very aware of any small micro changes in the environment, because it has an impact on what it is we're producing. We effectively crop 38 hectares of mushrooms off a 15 hectare site. We are, I think you could say, one of the original vertical farms. It's a trendy thing to be now, but we've been doing it for 50 years, and that is really how the mushroom industry works. So growing mushrooms is inherently a very virtuous circle. We take local byproducts to create compost, in which the mushrooms grow, and then we return the spent compost. We grow the mushrooms, and then we return the spent compost to the surrounding arable land. And it's a circular philosophy that's probably the most central part of our strategy in terms of waste management. It involves trying to minimize use of resources, but also treating all outputs, including what would have once been thought of as a waste stream, as inherently having value, and working quite hard to identify what that value is. And there's a lot of pieces in that puzzle. Sounds very simple, but it's quite different from a linear approach where you basically use what you need and move on. And I think it probably warrants mentioning at this point that most of what I'm talking about is how we've tried to create a sustainable business, one that has the least impact on the land and the people involved, and is financially sustainable. So much of our waste minimization and waste management techniques have been steadily refined for a long time now. We've been working on them for years and have adopted science and new technology as it's been available. To give you some more specific, so that's kind of our philosophy, but practically what does that mean? Well, to grow 10,000 tonnes of mushrooms, we have a lot of inputs. In fact, we have a huge amount of inputs. We use 23,000 tonnes of waste or byproducts from other food industries to make our composts. And that includes the sort of enormous amounts of wheat straw and chicken litter every week. And that means we start out with about 1,200 tonnes of phase 1 compost every week. Obviously, as you can see, the remainder there is made up of water. And water is a really important part of the composting process, but it's also a really important resource full stop. So we do our best to minimise that. Rainwater is captured and used as much as possible, which is why I wanted to show you where we capture some of it. We also use all the runoff water. So most intense phase is when we wet the bales and start making the compost. And the majority of the water we use at that initial stage, the goody water as we refer to it, it comes from our goody water tank. So the goody water is simply the collection of water that we've used to do the initial mix. So it's full of only good nutrients. There's no additives, no chemicals or otherwise attached to it. And anything that doesn't go stay in the compost feeds into that goody water tank. It's a really efficient way of minimising water use. Another byproduct that we extract and capture during the composting process is ammonium sulfate. This in turn is used in place of fertilizers on the surrounding farmland that you could see. This is collected through the ammonia scrubber, which is part of our process to keep the air, reduce smell, keep the air clean, and generally look after our environment. So mushrooms are relatively a very resource efficient food. They take about 20 litres of water to produce 1 kilo of mushrooms compared to about 200 litres for tomatoes or 280 litres for potatoes and an enormous 2,500 litres for apples, for rice. Now, when you take a moment to think what a kilo of mushrooms looks like, it makes you realise just how many mushrooms you get and how efficient that conversion process is. Coming out of the growing stage though, we have a lot of spent mushroom compost. Every week we change out some of our growing rooms and we're left with about 600 tonnes of spent mushroom compost. It's amazing stuff. The 100% of it is recycled into arable cropping and into gardening and landscaping. And some of it is used in the perfect world. Some of it is used to grow the wheat we use in the next year's compost. So spent mushroom compost is really rich in nutrients. The organic matter in it helps improve soil structure. It has really good water holding properties. It's full of nutrients like P and K and slow release nitrogen, and it's very clean. So it's been heat treated at the end of the mushroom cycle, growing cycle. We cook out each of the rooms, so we make sure that there's no weeds and seeds or disease. And we've done quite a few trials with Lincoln on how effective this is as a growing medium. I think one of the things that we have come to understand is actually part of its benefit as a fertilizer is actually that it continues to slow release for a long time. So the initial trials that we've done have only lasted 2 years, and it's probably a piece of work we have to do to look at a much longer term trial. But that's, as I say, work in progress. So this is a real waste stream for us, but it's so full of natural goodness that we see it as a huge opportunity. And we've spent a lot of time and effort identifying different opportunities. And it will continue to be a work in progress. With that much of an output, you need to find an efficient way of using it. So I'll have a look at some of the things we're doing there. Other areas where we've managed some of our waste, and in this case minimised it, is our carbon footprint. And this is really a reflection. The more you understand, the more you're aware you have to act. So over the past 5 or so years, we've focused quite hard on energy efficiency projects. And this has helped us reduce our effective carbon footprint by around about 1,000 tonnes of carbon per annum. And we've done that by changing our growing technologies, first and foremost, upgrading and retrofitting energy efficient parts of equipment, and reducing all the losses that were sneaking out through leakage or otherwise. And I think to be fair to say that none of this happens by chance. So full kudos to the team and the management team at Meadow for the enormous amount of work that they have put into this. This has been an ongoing process of refinement and improvement. And it's only through their efforts that we've actually made the progress we have. Every month we track our energy usage and we look at all the different opportunities there are to improve. And we've seen some enormous gains through doing that. And also key to waste management is input management. So to that end, we've made a really serious dent in our inputs by just continually chipping away at what it was we were using. One of the biggest differences that we've made is upgrading our growing facilities. And part of our business model is a commitment to excellence and adoption of new technologies, and things like our desire to minimise waste and our desire to reduce our footprint has really been quite key drivers in making the decisions to upgrade. So, and it's been an enormous investment, and anyone who lives around the area will have watched us building non-stop for most of the past 11 years. But the reality is that it's also paying back in all sorts of different ways. So by upgrading our growing systems, we've reduced our water usage by 37%. It's helped with our energy usage, as we just said. And in many ways, it's helped us reduce our footprint and our waste, basically our inputs, which obviously then relate to our outputs. So post-harvest. So that's all really, I suppose, very much at the production end, and it's often a part of the process that isn't tracked when people are looking at the waste management. Post-harvest, there's also lots of opportunities. For us, cool chain is absolutely key. So if mushrooms continue to respire after they're picked, and they come off the beds at 18 degrees, for every hour that they sit at 18 degrees, we lose a day an effective day of shelf life, so at top quality. So we work really hard to get the mushrooms down in temperature as fast as we can through vacuum cooling. We then work really hard to make sure that they stay in a really good condition and they remain cool. And all of that is the kind of simple process that anyone can do in their fridge and in their house. It's the small things that make the biggest differences. So one of the things that you can see there is our packaging. We had managed to eliminate about 5 million, the equivalent of 5 million plastic drink bottles. That's 80 tonne of plastic packaging out of the cool chain over the past few years. And that's been, again, a concerted effort to move to more environmentally friendly formats, but also to make sure that we were looking after our products. Food waste, because it doesn't look nice, or it's got a bit old, or it's the celery that's gone wilted, or it's the mushrooms that have gone brown, is a real contributor to the waste numbers. So, and I'll be a bit controversial here, there's a huge emphasis on reducing plastic and reducing packaging overall in stores. But actually packaging has a place, and we should take a more holistic perspective on how we think about these things. Packaging, and we think that having the right kind of packaging is much more important than not having packaging. So if we can find packaging that is environmentally friendly and will actually enable the products to stay in good condition longer, that is much more valuable than getting rid of all the packaging that there is. So that's what we try and do. And we work very hard with the Soft Plastics Accord and other entities, trying to make sure that we find packaging that allows the product to breathe and it helps retain its shelf life and its quality over time, assuming that the cool chain is retained. So don't just disregard packaging altogether. It's an important place to play in food. So what next? Well, we've made a commitment to be carbon neutral by at a scope 1 and 2 level at the growing site this year, within this 12 months, and to be carbon neutral as a business by 2025. We have done a lot of development on sustainable packaging and will continue to do that. And as I say, it's about the right packaging, not no packaging. We continue to track our resource use and our inputs, and we make sure that we are finding the most efficient way of doing things, whether it's energy or water or any of our inputs. And that factors into our purchasing decisions, and that factors into our investment as to what we're doing going forward. And then we're looking at quite, I'd say, more fun, innovative ways of using our waste streams. So be they energy, biocontrol, or packaging. Our spent mushroom compost, 600 tonne a week, is a huge opportunity. We just haven't quite figured out what for. So we're looking at energy, and which is one option for us with something like a biomass boiler. We're also looking at whether it can enhance biocontrol. But all of these are projects that are ongoing. And obviously at the moment, we're looking at how it can benefit crops that it's associated with. We have about 50 tonne a week of stalks that are a waste stream. And we have been doing work which had a reasonable amount of press when everyone got very excited about it. So we did a lot of work with the Biopolymer Network into different uses for the stalks. They're quite a unique material because of the way they respond to water. And so we've come up with a means by which we can turn our stalks into cardboard punnets or cardboard bags. What we haven't come up with is a way we can scale this. So none of this comes easy, as I'm sure the team at Meadow would highlight. And all of it takes lots of time and commitment. But I think it just shows the opportunity if you keep looking, and we will keep trying to find ways to use these waste streams and derive value and ongoing use from them, because they're too big to not do that. And then we've launched a new business. This is really exciting. It launched last week. Was it this week? The weeks are blurring a little bit for isolated reasons, or reasons of isolation, whichever way you want to look at it. So Food Nation was launched last week, and this is not really, if I'm realistic, this is not a waste management job. We introduced Food Nation because of our desire to change diets and enable people to eat in a more plant-based manner. As Julia said, more plants and more plates for more people and for our planet. But conveniently, it also enables us to use mushrooms. So instead of using imported soy or grains or beans and pulses as a base, we're using mushrooms as a base ingredient for creating a range of products like minces, like burgers and the such like, that we can offer to the world. It's all about, it's not about waste, it's all about taste and making delicious food. The benefit is that we can actually use products that previously people would have kicked out of there or thrown away because they didn't look as good as tier 1 products need to look. So the more that we can actually turn less than perfect products into edible and delicious options, the better. So this is our original current range, and you can see we process the food. So we blend up the different plant ingredients, and we're not trying to mimic meat, we're trying to celebrate plants. And we make a real point if you could see a bit closer, you'd be able to see that you can actually visibly notice the ingredients in these products. And they're as clean label as they can possibly be. But all of these come out of opportunities. All of these are opportunities, I suppose, that we've sort of identified as we've started to look at where there were gaps in the system and what we could do differently and what we could do better. And none of them are immediately apparent, but after a little bit of work, there's lots of different ways that you can skin the cat, so to speak. So as I say, it's brand new. Food Nation's brand new. Please check us out on our website and Instagram. We're having a lovely time with it. We've got an enormous amount that we're about to put in the market. And if we weren't virtual, I'd be feeding you with it now. But we are virtual, so I just have to get you to find it somehow and check it out. I could talk for quite a lot longer on what we're doing, but I think that's probably my time. So before I go to questions, I just wanted to particularly call out a couple of people who are the experts in this space and helpfully answered lots of questions, and those two being Kerry Armstrong at Meadow and Miranda, Associate Professor Miranda Morosa down at Otago. So huge thanks to you guys for answering my dumb questions. Hopefully I've represented you well and said everything accurately. Julia, over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Miranda. That's fantastic. Let me just bring this up here. Right, brilliant. Great. It looks like we've had a few questions come through. My main question was, Miranda, are you going to come back and do another event so we can actually try those? That would be fantastic.
With pleasure. May even cook.
All right. She said it now, so we've got to lock in there. Brilliant. Let's just flick through here. Great. So we've got a few Q&As that have come through. I'll just start by reading out a couple. So we've got one here from TC Chatterton. Miranda, what is your definition of waste? Does it include downgrades that recover some value, e.g. animal feed, but not the same as the human food?
No, if you've realized value in it, then it's not really incorporated. I think there are a lot of very technical definitions of waste, but I'm going to apply that circular model that I just showed you. And to me, that's about finding means by which you can extract value and continue to utilize, and I don't mean monetary value, and continue to utilize that resource. So the SMC is a good example of that, the spent mushroom compost that goes back on crops and continues to add nutrition to those crops.
Brilliant. I've got another question here. Does food wastage include food that has been weather damaged or pest damaged?
Yes, actually. If I had followed the script, I would have said, for example, things that have been hit by hail strike. So anything that looks less than perfect and is harder to sell is what I would encompass within that. And there is a increasing awareness of this as a problem and a trend to, and I think both the organic movement, but also just the awareness of the scale of waste as a problem has meant things like the ugly range or the uglies, I think they refer to it, fruit becoming more acceptable. So yes.
Brilliant. A question here from Michael. Are there any issues with agri-chemical residues in the straw from the wheat production?
Not that I'm aware of at all. And we're quite careful on our testing. Kerry would be able to answer that better. But no, we do a lot of testing on all of our products, and we test for heavy metals, for chemical residues, all of those things. And no, there aren't. So there may, at an input level, I think it would be absolutely minimal. It is absolutely non-existent at an output level.
Yeah, that was a question I had too as well, Michael. So yeah, must have read my mind. One from Charlotte Sullivan. How do you resource your waste reduction efforts? Do you have a person tasked with developing and making these initiatives happen?
Nice, Charlotte. It's a whole of business approach. So a little bit like sustainability, if it sits in a corner, it won't happen. So this is much more central to our philosophy that it's a little bit like leave no one behind. Everyone is tasked with looking at opportunities to improve the process and minimizing inputs and optimizing outputs is just part of that conversation.
Yeah. Another one from John Mawson, Food Nation. One criticism of plant-based analogues is that they're often high in fat and salt. Do you feel mushroom-based products are better in this regard?
Thank you for asking. Lovely to have the stage on that one. First thing I think really importantly, we're not a meat analogue and we're not trying to mimic meat. We are reflecting centre plate propositions. So it's the way the whole idea is we want to make it easy and delicious as a choice. So for people who want to eat more plants, here's an alternative. So our products are actually high in fibre. They're not pumped full of protein. We don't need the level of protein we have, and we're talking about plants, so they're not full of protein at the same level either. And they are low in fat. So our current range tends to sit sort of 100 grams is about 6% fat, as opposed to most meat products, which are more in the 12 to 20% fat. Our sodium is not dramatically low, but it's certainly in no way high either. And all of the nutrient information is on the website, although I have a funny feeling I have to upload one more thing there. But yeah, give me a day.
How has COVID affected operations at Meadow, especially in keeping up output and also momentum on waste reduction projects?
It's enormously affected production operations, and I think it's probably been one of the most challenging things we've had, which, given everything that Christchurch has been subjected to, is not a bad effort. So we basically said people first, and we made sure that everyone is safe. And we put in place a huge number of changes, new wash stations, new cafes, we've got temporary buildings, we've changed our shifts. Again, hats off to the team at Meadows, because I'm just the pain in the ass that's constantly on the phone and the email and Zoom about this, but that everyone has worked very, very, very hard to make sure that people both were safe but also felt safe. Practically speaking, it's business as usual. So some things have, where it hasn't been a priority, it has had to take back second stage. And some things just have not physically been possible. But if I use a really specific example, one of the concerns we had when we went into level 4 was we can't produce if we can't get rid of our spent mushroom compost. We are talking very large volumes, and we shift it out every week. But that's part of what was it, that whole through the process, what do we call it, service provision was part of what was allowed. So in the same way you could take milk away from the dairy farm, you could take waste like compost, spent mushroom compost away from the production site. So as best we could, it's been business as usual, but there's certainly been a lot of extra work to achieve that.
And I think everyone's sort of feeling a bit the same at the moment, aren't they? Especially those of us in Christchurch who think that they've been through a lot, and then something like this happens. So we've got it's all about the old pivot and competitive advantage, I think.
But can I just say to that, I think this has been the most amazing opportunity for people in the hort and ag sector to demonstrate how important they are and what a great job they've done. And it's been really nice to see those stories coming through, because it's easy. It's interesting. I feel like I live in both islands. I spend a lot of time in Christchurch. It's interesting to see the different perspectives.
Absolutely, absolutely. One here from Stuart McIntyre that's had a few thumbs up here. Miranda, how balanced is the protein in mushroom mince?
Balanced, as you're talking about the amino acids, how many amino acids, what the makeup is?
I've just got how balanced is the protein, so interpret that with what you will.
I think when we talk about balanced protein, we're talking about how complete the protein is, which is, do they have the 9 essential amino acids? It's a great question, and I can't easily answer it, actually. We're in the middle of doing some additional testing on that. I can tell you the one that contains quinoa is looking pretty good. Our protein comes from pea protein, and other than the vegetables, which are the majority of the ingredients, it comes from pea protein, it comes from pulses like chickpeas, and comes from hemp, it comes from kiwi quinoa. So some of those would be more complete than others, but I think you're probably talking complete, not balanced.
Okay. And this is a good sort of follow-on here from Maxine. Hi Miranda, as a food technologist, your brand sounds very interesting. Your images in the last slide look fairly developed. Is Food Nation ready to go to market? Is there further development going on? Also, would this product only be available within the domestic market?
So Food Nation launched last week in foodbox.co.nz, and they shipped us out. They took us the first couple of days, and then they said, oh, we want more. So we've been furiously running around making sure they had enough. We have launched 2 products, two magic minces, and in another month or 6 weeks we'll be on the market with 3 new burgers. So they're all made, we're just finalizing packaging. So that's another thing that's been slowed down. Things slowed down a little bit. We have lots of distributors who basically post-COVID lockdown we can go out with, but we just haven't been able to go out with the likes of Gilmore's and other retailers in this process. So it will be, Foodbox delivers nationally. My food bag has got us in a couple of weeks or a month's time. So we will be available everywhere, and we are continuing to develop lots of different ranges.
Brilliant. So something to look out for.
There are quite a few questions there. I think hopefully I covered them.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's a fair response there. One from Leanne Kruger. What is Meadowfresh's focus on, I think she means Meadow Mushrooms, focus on supporting local companies to help support these waste projects?
Well, a lot of the companies we work with are local companies. So inherently what we do is tends to be with local companies. We take local straw, we take local chicken manure, we then distribute it locally. So we do quite a lot along those lines already. That's just sort of part and parcel of how we're connected. I suppose the other end is that we're involved in various groups like this one, where we try and share what it is we're doing. So that's, I mean, everything. We're very locally centric.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that we've found from us as well. Every day when I'm on my way to work, I actually drive past Meadow Mushrooms in Canterbury, and I have seen a lot of what they're doing in their local community. So it's brilliant. One from Sarah Lockhart. Do you have an organic mushroom range? Is this something you're thinking of, or would it be achievable in a mushroom growing system?
Our ranges, when we test for residue, no. In the New Zealand definition, as it stands at the strictest level, no. If I was in America, my answer would be yes. So there's no global standard for organics. In fact, in New Zealand, there's not even an absolute singular standard. We use chemicals to get rid of termites and flies and the such like on our trays. We don't spray them on the product itself, but we do clean with them. There's no residual that we on any of the products, which is why it would be acceptable in in America, but we wouldn't adhere under those controls in New Zealand. So we view ourselves as right on the cusp, but at the moment we won't be going further down that track.
It's good to know. It's good to know. One from Henry. In terms of mushroom casing and vertical farming, have you examined hemp, cellulose, and alternative fibre to grow mushroom in?
Yeah, it doesn't work. I thought that was a cool idea too. We've looked at cellulose, and overseas the nutrients come from a large part of it comes from the animal waste product, which is why mushroom's the only thing in the veggie section that has selenium. I know Brazil nuts do, but they don't tend to be in the veggie section. So we're really high in selenium. And there is no plant-based medium that mushrooms grow in commercially at this point globally. So there's lots of things that are going on in this space to try and make it more effective. And it is a work in progress, what alternative mediums could be used, but it just doesn't contain the sufficient nutrients for mushrooms to grow at this point.
Interesting. That's very interesting to note, that one. Lakshmi, sorry Lakshmi if I've pronounced your name wrong, is the spent mushroom substrate used as such as fertilizer, or are there any treatments done?
I think yes, it would be used as a fertilizer. So particularly the easiest, but fertilizer is quite a broad category. So I'm a little nervous in saying that. So you would buy it at a garden centre very clearly as a fertilizer. It would be spread over the land, over arable crops to fertilize and add nutrients. That's what it's done for. It also has the water retention properties, but and I don't know what the strict definition of a fertilizer is, but the nutrients I referred to before, P, K, slow release nitrogen, all of them are nutrients that you would source from a fertilizer. So I think it would be fair to say yes.
Cool. One from Andy Cooper. Do you ensure products used for compost are grown in an environmentally responsible manner, and how?
We work quite closely with our suppliers. I'm not sure what certification exactly. Kerry could answer that, but we have pretty close relationships with our suppliers, and we do test the inputs of our compost. So we make sure there's not high degrees of variability or random things coming into them. What actual certification we require for each of them, I can't answer that, sorry.
Okay, one from Edith. I think this is probably a consumer question that I'm very interested in as well. Do you do dried mushrooms?
We used to. So we used to do dried mushrooms, but quite honestly, we cannot do so efficiently, cost effectively. So the market coming out of China, where we pay our staff too much in New Zealand to be able to compete with the Chinese imports. And a mushroom is predominantly water. So that makes it very hard for us to do that in a cost-effective manner now.
Yeah, I wonder if that's...
Don't get me wrong, I have no problem with the fact that the cost of our mushrooms are what they are, but it's just not cost-effective for us to do it.
Yeah, just a personal experience tip there, Edith. I'd suggest seeing if you can pop some in your air fryer if you've got one. That's something that I've been doing. So I don't know, give it a go. Let us know how it goes. We've got another one here from Charlotte. Hi, Miranda. How long does the growing compost last for in terms of either cycles of mushroom or time?
So I'll answer that two ways. So from seed to plate, it's about 6 weeks. So we make the compost over 3 weeks. The first crop, then we put the spawn in, and the first crop is basically, we case it, and the first crop comes off 6 weeks later. So that's one answer, and then we crop for the next 3 or 4 weeks. So that's about a 12-week cycle. The other way I could interpret that question is from a fertilizer perspective, it just continues to sort of break down and compost, so it lasts for a very long time.
Cool, that's good to know. There's a few questions that have come through. What does SMC stand for in the slide before the Food Nation one? A couple of people have asked that one.
Sorry, that is a really bad habit. Spent mushroom compost.
There we go. That's. I feel like a few people will be at ease with that answer.
Sorry. I really consciously wrote down, don't do it. And I did.
Another one here. May I know what you do with the mushroom stem that is cut off during the harvesting?
Yeah, so that's the 50 or so tonne that we have a week, and that's what we're trying to make paper out of. At the moment, we mix it in with the spent compost, and it increases the organic matter and just compost down.
Cool. A few questions about this one, about paddy straw. So it's supposed to absorb lesser water, and it is soft when compared to wheat straw. Any thoughts on saving water by using paddy straw? Has Meadow Mushrooms tried composting with paddy straw?
That is definitely out of my scientific realm. That is a Curry question.
There we go.
No idea. Sorry, I know that there will be a raft of people going, oh, how
that was the one question I needed.
But I don't know what the answer is, sorry.
No, that's fair, that's fair. One from Moira. How easy is it to change the type of straw you use to grow mushrooms and taking advantage of other local plant waste streams? Not
that easy. So when I mentioned that that our mushrooms are sensitive little souls, the environmental conditions in which we put them, and that may be humidity, temperature, the state of the compost, every one of those has a huge impact on the mushrooms and the output and the quality and all of those things. So small changes have a big impact.
Fair. Another question here, are your ingredients sourced from New Zealand? I'm guessing that's about the last few slides, the Food Nation stuff?
If in the perfect world, I'd show you a pot of the stuff that as we're making it, because it's just full of fresh, beautiful veggies. The pea protein is not. I'm hoping Leafed is going to come to market any moment soon, if anyone from Leafed is listening, because we're pretty excited about our protein base coming from New Zealand. We're also looking at something called water lentils, which some people will be aware of as another protein source, and working with other New Zealand entities who are investigating that as an option. So if we can, we do. And one of our stated goals is to look at novel ingredients. So we are working with Kiwi quinoa. I spoke to some of the guys at Brothers Hemp in the weekend, and we just keep refining. So our ambition is we will be increasingly when the products are there, but we have to also make sure the products deliver on the promise.
I do happen to know that there's at least 5 people from Leaf Foods listening and watching today, so take that as a call out, Leaf Foods.
It's fair to say they know we're waiting for it.
Take that as you will.
Yeah.
Here's a good question, and I think this is from a consumer point of view as well. I'm interested in this one. Do you have branded mushroom compost product going to garden centres?
It's not branded Meadow, no.
Okay.
And that is mainly because most of the places we send it would like to house brand it.
Okay, no, good to know. We've got one here from Ross, from the Leaf team actually. We are very busy working on it. Watch this space, he said. So hold him to that. That sounds like a contract to me.
Yeah, no, Ross, it'd be fair to say that Food Nation has come to market after about 8 months of work, and we've spent a lot of time talking to people in the industry to source different components for the products. We're not trying to mimic meat, so we're not using a whole lot of technology overseas. This is quite a novel proposition to create a truly plant centric product that celebrates plants, and it hasn't been wildly easy. It's new technology. We've had lots of learnings for the people involved, and there's products being developed that are really great in New Zealand, but a lot of them are in development. They're not here yet.
Cool. I guess this next one is an overarching question. In all of your experience with Meadow Mushrooms, what has been the biggest challenge to the mushroom business, or what do you expect to be the biggest challenge to the mushroom business?
Do you know, I feel like it's a little bit like there's no silver bullet on most of these conversations. If there was one challenge, then you'd find a solution. But just like everything else, it's a little bit like a game of, the kids' game that you play where you hit one down and something else pops up. Well, it's kind of the same. Yeah. There's always challenges, and I'd emphasize that that's our mushroom farm. It's not a factory. Every day, I've been involved for 50 years, albeit I'm not quite 50, just pointing that out there. But there's always different challenges, and they come at you from all sorts of different angles. So our biggest challenge is continually growing what our customers want, and making sure we're doing a great job by them and New Zealand's consumers.
That sounds brilliant. I think we've got time for just maybe 2 more. This one's from Rahul. For the purpose of reducing carbon footprint, I guess overall, are you planning to switch your vehicles into EV or any other tasks that you're going to complete to reduce your carbon footprint overall as a business?
So to answer the specific, are we switching to EV? With the cost benefit analysis that we've done and looking at all the associated variables, not quite yet, although actually we did that about a year ago, and it's an ever-changing feast. So like all of these things, we are pretty cautious in how we approach them, and we just keep reviewing how far. We're not bleeding edge, by any means, but I'd say we're in the front of the pack. So when it makes sense and we can do it, and in some cases we will push harder and make a bigger commitment to longer term opportunities. At the moment, when we looked at it a year ago, it didn't make sense, but things are moving very fast in that space. I personally have gone fully electric on a car, but that's different.
Cool. Probably the last one here, we've got one from Ralph. Do you sterilise, he's put in little quotation marks, the compost after finishing harvest, or is it just turned out as it is? If so, can it then go on to produce mushrooms if it is treated appropriately?
Okay, so the terms sterilise versus pasteurise, they're all quite specific questions and come down to quite specific temperatures. We cook out the compost, so no, the mushrooms, it will not go on and produce crops of mushrooms. And we cook it out, and I want to say 80 degrees, but I could be totally wrong on that. We cook it out to make sure that there are no bugs in there and that it is clean. Because otherwise, fields and fields and fields of mushrooms, which may not be doing the job that we need it to do in supporting the soils that's going on.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us today, Miranda. That's been such an insightful, I've learned a lot today. The eliminated, I've just written down here, elimination of 5 million plastic bottles in a year, or 5 million plastic bottles worth in a year. Absolutely incredible. I think that's amazing. You don't hear that all the time, so I'm personally very impressed.
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me. All the best.
Thank you, and we'll have to see you again for those samples that you've promised, so everyone keep an eye on that events page. Great.
Thanks, Julia. Bye.
Thank you. And just leading in to the next events from B-Link, we've actually got an event coming up on the 21st of May. It's a protein shift event. We've got 3 amazing speakers lined up. We've got Sue Trafford, who founded the Charing Cross Sheep Dairy Farm in Canterbury, who's coming to talk about the changing consumer preferences, along with plant-based expert Kate Eglinton, as well as Karen Zinn, dietitian and nutritionist. And since you've come today, we've given you a discount code, which is leading_innovation. If you pop that into your promo code on Eventbrite, we'll give you a free ticket just for coming along. This has been an absolutely fantastic event. It's the first one that we've gone live and digital, so thank you for sticking with us. Miranda, it's been amazing having you here. Really, really appreciate you giving up your time and giving us some really insightful and fantastic slides and information. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone, and we hope to see you at the next event just next week. Take care.